Hello and welcome to the Spooky Chris podcast. My name is Chris Ringler. I am your aforementioned Spooky Chris. I thank you for joining me. This episode, I am going to be joined by Geoff Gibbins, who has recently released the book Critical Intelligence: Strengthening Human Thinking in the Age of AI. Geoff is a managing director at Board of Innovation Global AI Consultancy. He has nearly 20 years of strategy and innovation consulting experience and previously served as managing director at Accenture. He's designed and built AI-powered products and human AI collaboration systems for companies such as Walmart, 3M, Vanguard Group, Nestle, Suntory, and the Coca-Cola Company. He has been a speaker at the Autonomous Conference and conducts regular webinars on enterprise AI. His master's degree from the University of Oxford and Imperial College London, and lives in Manhattan. This is the first of 3 books he'll have coming out, and I'll touch on that in the outro. But I invite you to listen along on a fascinating conversation about AI. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me, Geoff Gibbins. How are you?
Good, thanks, Chris. Good to be here.
I appreciate you making time to talk to me. I'll dive right in. We're gonna talk about your book that's coming out, but I figure we'll set the table first. Now, can you tell me a little about your journey, kind of working with companies to help them with innovation? That's kind of what some of your background is with that kind of stuff. How did that kind of start?
Yeah, sure. So I've been working as a consultant for nearly 20 years now, primarily in innovation and new product development and business model change, and worked across different industries. And that's everything from how do you reinvent the toilet to developing new online financial planning services. But in the last few years, really doing a lot of work with companies around AI, generative AI, most specifically, usually around how do they actually reinvent the way that they work, developing their strategy for how they compete in the age of agents and agentic commerce, and also building custom AI solutions for them. And as part of that, I've really seen a lot about and got fascinated by how humans and AI work together. And I see that there's a lot of companies out there that I work with and people that I observe and meet in everyday life that I think everyone gets very excited about generative AI and all the possibilities. But I think the risk is that people see it really as a problem of technology, and to me, I actually see that it's really where companies are actually going to lead, where people are going to thrive, is actually thinking about how do humans and AI interact and work together in new and different ways to achieve things that weren't previously possible. And so I've got very interested in the last year or two around how do humans and AI interact. And I guess this year it really became very clear to me that I read at the early part of the year a lot of reports around the emerging research around cognitive atrophy that results from the usage of AI. So I think probably a lot of your listeners will be familiar with the idea that now you can kind of outsource your thinking to AI, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's so easy, it's so tempting. Why write a thing when you can get AI to write it? Why come up with the idea when you can get AI to come up with 50 ideas? All those kinds of things. And so there's a lot of research showing that there's a real cognitive atrophy that's happening, and people are losing their ability to think deeply and focus on things. And that's happening at a really bad time. It's happening at a time when, as individuals facing so much misinformation, so much information that's thrown at us all the time, an exponential increase in content that we experience and that's put in front of us all the time. And also what's real and not real is becoming harder to actually distinguish. And so you have this real critical thinking crisis at a time when we need to be on top of our game with critical thinking. And so that got me thinking about it. It's a real paradox. And so I started doing a lot of research into critical thinking, and it's actually really a topic that people aren't really taught about in schools, in colleges. There's not really explicit instruction on critical thinking, and yet if you look at employers, that's one of the most important things they look for in people.
Absolutely.
And so the education system, you look at people are primarily, the education system, if I'm crude about it, is primarily focused on memorization and test taking.
Yeah.
Now, those are things that AI is really awesome at. In fact, probably better than nearly every human, and probably going to keep on getting better. But critical thinking is a skill that really is going to be incredibly important for humans as they work with AI more and more, as well as actually a way of staying ahead of AI and future-proofing your skills and your career and what you do in life.
Awesome. That's fantastic. And now, when did you first kind of become interested in artificial intelligence? And was it just kind of a natural progression of the work you were already doing?
Yeah, I think it's been a slower journey of development, I would say. So even, 6, 7, 8 years ago, before the kind of Chat GPT, Gen AI um, hype and explosion of a few years ago, I was working with clients on machine learning models. So doing a lot of work with Vanguard, for example, in the financial services space, in terms of how do you actually develop models to help people understand their financial options and plan for their future, and how do you actually make that easily explainable. So a lot of that work on the machine learning side, but I'd say over the last 3 years in particular, since the launch of ChatGPT, it's really taken off. And working in consulting, it's really changed the work that I do, the way you do that work, and the type of value you're able to offer to clients too. So the potential to automate the type of work that I do has made me think a lot about this in particular as well.
Fantastic. Now, how have you seen it evolve? When once you kind of really started paying attention, how have you seen it evolve so far? I would imagine it'd be fascinating to kind of, kind of measure that.
Yeah, so I'd say I think that particularly over the last year, I've seen that there is a growing interest in and recognition of the problem around critical thinking. I think more and more of us are seeing that, just in the same way that when you started using Google Maps or sat nav, you kind of lost the skill of reading a map and having that kind of spatial awareness. And I think people are seeing that same kind of thing, but in all areas of knowledge work, right? How do you write? How do you think and analyze arguments? How do you come up with ideas? All those types of things. It's very easy to outsource that now to AI, and people are recognizing that in their own life, and the kind of the brain rot that is sort of becoming a cultural topic. And then there's also academic research that shows how real the impact of that is. And I guess the the flip side of that, I think, is that what I don't see enough focus on is how do we change that and how do we flip that? There was a study that came out last year which showed that like only about 20% of companies that are all focused on AI training and AI deployment, only about 20% of them are actually focusing on skills in critical thinking and evaluating those outputs. And I do work with companies. I was actually in a meeting today with a company, like a large pharmaceutical company. We're developing a training program all around AI usage in the company. And I'm starting to see that it's very obvious to people that it's not just about how do you use the tools, it's about how do you evaluate the work that comes out from those tools, but also how do you work with them to help evaluate you and help you to do a better job too.
That's interesting. That's one aspect I haven't seen approached. Is it's always how we we
Yeah.
interact with it, not how we should interact with it, or how it's
Hmm.
how we need to kind of evolve ourselves. I haven't seen it that way.
Yeah, and
Now
I
how?
think
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
and I
Go
think
ahead.
no, go ahead.
Oh, no, 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 no. You're good.
So I think a lot of people, and I think this is true for all of us, right? Like who started using ChatGPT 3 years ago, your mental model is of a chatbot, right? Where you are the instructor and you're telling it what to do and you're evaluating its work, right? And so that's relevant. But I think that's just one way of looking at the role that AI can play. And the way I see things evolving in the next few years is that people are going to start to think of AI as a collaborator and a teammate, and think of themselves as working in what I call human AI teams. And so in those teams, it's almost like you can imagine you start your workday and there's a very expert, very detail-oriented person sat next to you the entire day. And at the start of your workday, they say, hey, I've got the entire day free. If you want to run anything by me, if you want me to help you or anything, I'm right here. And starting to think about working with a colleague like that, and then actually having three or four of those at your disposal, or 10 of those at your disposal for different tasks, gives you a different way of thinking about how your work works, but also how you can get the most out of working with AI. So you can work with AI to actually help spot biases in your own work and actually identify what are blind spots that you might have and things that you don't really appreciate in the work of others or that you don't think about enough. You can get it to evaluate your work, right? Not just you evaluate it work, the work of AI. So you're evaluating AI, but it's evaluating you. And then I'd see a future in the near a future where people are being evaluated on how well they evaluate AI, and AI is evaluating how well the humans evaluate the AI, and it becomes circular, right? So it's actually not just me saying whether or not I think the AI is right or not. It's actually about how do we work together effectively as colleagues in a new kind of paradigm of work.
That's actually is really interesting, and is I think that's I mean that's a fascinating way to think of that because I think most people kind of consider it kind of like a I don't know, cheat codes doesn't seem like the right term, but kind of like a, oh, I need this. Just I'm gonna go,
Yeah, it's like a
I'm gonna send
task.
this out
It's
there
like
to
a
fetch
task
that
rabbit,
for me.
basically. Yeah.
And instead of kind of evaluating, like it's more of a process and a collaboration, as you say. Now, how do you see how our engagement with AI is evolving as it kind of gets, um, again, for lack of a better term, smarter and gains more knowledge? How is it changing how we interact with it?
Yeah, so one of the things I think I wrote about in the book is the practice of dialogue, and I think I see this changing in how people are working with AI. And I deliberately try. It's easy to slip into. I deliberately try in the book to talk about working with AI rather than using AI, right? And as thinking about it as a colleague and having real dialogue with AI. So rather than you working on the perfect prompt and saying here's exactly what I want and then just assuming that that's going to be the perfect answer for you. I see a lot more that people are thinking about AI as a collaborator and somebody they dialogue with. And so you have a starting point and then you go back and forth and you say, I want this, I want that. Can you give me feedback on this? And it's just much more of a collaborative dialogue. I see that shift a lot. Um, I equally think another shift I see is that people are becoming less afraid of AI. I think they're afraid of the impact of AI on society. There's a lot of that, but I think people are becoming less worried about AI's impact on their own career and their own employability. I think I've seen a shift in that, and I think partly that's because um, of two things. One is that there are so many companies that have tried to cut jobs and just automate away those jobs using AI, and they haven't really had a lot of success. I think that might come over time, but it hasn't actually happened yet. Uh, what's actually happening, I see a lot with companies I work with, is that AI is creating lots of new extra things to do. So it's actually adding to people's plates rather than giving them all this free time and making them worried that they're going to get automated away. So if you think about somebody who works in marketing, right? They would be, the initial promise of AI in marketing, there was actually a famous quote that went around about 2 years ago from Sam Altman at OpenAI saying that 95% of what agencies and marketers do is going to get automated. And maybe that's true, but there's also so much new stuff that they have to do that never had to be done before. So if I'm working in marketing, I could think about I can use AI to write my email newsletter, right? And it could do a decent job, maybe not a great job, but could do a decent job. And you can think about that as like a nice efficiency saver. That's great. But what we're now seeing is that there's a new to-do list that marketers have as it relates to AI. So not only do they have to send an email newsletter and do ad campaigns to humans, they also have to think about how are they actually marketing to AI agents, right? So how are they making sure that ChatGPT or Perplexity or Gemini is finding their content on the internet? So that's an entirely new realm of work that marketers have to now pick up, and they're told that they have to do that fast, with less resources and less time because there's all this automation potential. Equally, they are being told that they need to they need to actually uh, rebuild their websites. So that their websites need to be readable by humans, but also by machines and agents. So
Oh, wow.
if you're, if you're working on, let's say you're in the business of selling shoes, right? You need to have your website structured so that the shoes look beautiful and you describe them and there's beautiful videos and pictures, but you also need to have very detailed product data that can be read by an AI agent that understands all of the sizing of your shoes and where they were sourced from and the prices of everything. And you need to structure those data tables in a way that's readable to those AI agents. We also see a situation in which you have to understand how different models analyze data. And it's quite different. So the way that OpenAI would analyze that data table and the things that it would recommend from that data table is different to how Gemini looks at that. So there's so much new stuff that a marketer has to do to be successful. So the question of automation and their job going away is kind of a non-starter when they have so many new extra things to do.
Oh, amazing. Now you've written a book, Critical Intelligence: Strengthening Human Thinking in the Age of AI. What prompted you to want to write that?
It was really thinking about the challenge of knowledge work today, working as a professional, somebody who's writing or creating or in meetings every day. And how do you think about when it's so easy to outsource your thinking? How do you think about deliberately strengthening your critical thinking? And how do you think about understanding the way that AI works and how you should work with AI in order to future-proof your career? So that really was the basis of it. And in finding so much research on the critical thinking crisis that we see, so much research on how easy it is to train on critical thinking, it made me think there was something there. And what got me excited about it too was that there are so many ways in which people can work with AI to actually help solve this problem.
Now, how do you define critical intelligence?
Okay, so the question was, how do you define critical intelligence?
Yeah.
So to me, critical intelligence actively is about the active practice of strengthening your critical thinking skills, as well as building stronger human AI literacy so that you know how to work with AI and how to adapt your skills in the age of AI.
Perfect. Now, how would you recommend, we strengthen our approach in our interactions with AI? Like, what can we do to be better stewards of its usage?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things I would think about. The first is actually having a fundamental understanding of how AI works and the way that it works that's different to humans. And so I think that's not about learning how to prompt effectively. I think that changes a lot. It's been changing a lot the last few years and it's different for different models. It's about understanding how does AI actually work in terms of how does it pull in data? How does it spot patterns? What is it really good at? And what is it not so good at? And then using that to shape how you would think about the role that it plays in your work. So understanding AI. The second piece is actually understanding different ways you could work with AI and which is the right one for the type of thing you're doing. So there are many situations in which it would be easy for me to just kind of let AI autonomously work through whatever needs to be done. right? So I might say that I'm going to have AI run a spell check of a document. I'm not going to actually look through every word that it's correcting and see that I agree with each correction it's making. I'm going to trust that it's actually going to find the typos and make those corrections, right? Because that's a fairly low stakes thing. If there is a typo, it's not the end of the world. If there's something that I'm working on that's actually much more important, I need to make sure that I am using what's called like a human in the loop way of working with AI, where before any decision is made, I'm actually checking what the AI output is and using that to make the final call. And so that's more important in high stakes situations. Equally, there are other times when you might actually think about, well, maybe actually it would be better for me to just kind of set the overall goals and parameters and have AI make decisions, but only within certain parameters. So, as an example, it might be that I would say, okay, AI, I want you to make sure that I'm stocked with XYZ products in my home. Here's your monthly budget. I want you to buy these things for the cheapest price possible. You figure it out. And I'm not going to bother exactly what those things are within those categories, but I just want to make sure that it happens, right? And so I let it make decisions, but within parameters that I've set. And so how do you actually work with AI? What's the level of involvement you should have in decision making? Um, and then the last piece is actually how do you work with it in terms of evaluating it, evaluating do I think that the data behind this is good enough? Do I think that what it's sharing with me is trustworthy? Like all of that evaluation. And then the last piece is actually around how do you adapt and evolve your own skills? And so I think this is one of the things that I think people find most important as they think about their own careers is how do they future-proof their careers and how do they think about what's going to make them stand out and stay important in a job market where AI is doing new things every day and becoming better and better every month or week seemingly. And so one of the things that I cover in the book is the concept of a skill life. One of the things I cover in the book is the concept of a half-life for skills. So take the example of an architect. There are many things that an architect does that are unique skills that architects have. And some of those things have a very short half-life. So understanding how to use a specific type of design software, like a CAD tool, like that's something that the software is going to change every 2 or 3 years probably, and the half-life of that skill is quite short, right? It's gonna go out of date, and you're gonna need to keep working on developing and upgrading your skills in that area. They're not going to last that long. Another example in that realm would be understanding building codes and regulations. They're going to change all the time, and so it's important for architects to have skills in that, but that's going to go out of date quickly. And also, those short half-life skills are usually the things that are easiest for AI to get better at as well. So, how do I memorize things? How do I actually execute tasks? All those things are like the most easily automated. And so for most people, they're important to have, but they're not really where you should focus your energy and your effort. The other type of skills are things where you have a long half-life. So in the case of the architect, that could be, for example, spatial awareness. Like how do different materials work within a space? How do you think about how people sense space and where people might feel claustrophobic or not? That spatial awareness is something that LLMs aren't really that good at, right? They have been trained on text from Reddit and they can describe spaces, but they don't really actually have spatial awareness, or not yet anyway. I'm sure they will in a few years once there's a lot more from robotics that's happened. But that spatial awareness, how can you actually lean into that skill, cultivate that skill? Same with client relationship management, very important for an architect. That's something that like a chatbot can't do that well thus far. And so, how do you actually become even better at understanding client needs and cultivating relationships with clients? Those are the types of things that an architect should be focusing on in order to future-proof their career.
Uh, so with, so many things are moving towards AI. What kind of advice do you have for folks that are still hesitant about engaging with it?
Yeah, great question. I think the most important thing is it's not about academic learning, it's about just doing something and actually experimenting with AI on a topic that you care about. So I don't know, let's say like, let's say you're a parent, you could find a topic that you find interesting and is not like super high stakes, and you can start a project with your child. You could, work on a project to do research about something. So for example, I do a lot of research with my son on ChatGPT all about airplanes because he's really interested in airplanes and he knows much more than I do, but we ask all sorts of questions and do research about the differences between different commercial jets and all these kinds of things, right? And so that's like an interesting thing that we can try out and do that's something that he's passionate about, I'm passionate about because he's passionate about. And you actually learn most about AI by interacting with it and doing something and seeing what works and what doesn't work. So I think a lot of people, there's a lot of kind of courses out there on prompt engineering and all that kind of stuff. But I think the most important thing is just to start using it and trying it.
What's interesting is you said something that just raised a question. How do you see, if you have a son, how do you see this generation that will grow up with, AI, they're kind of growing up hand in hand. How do you see one influencing the other?
Yeah, I think for I think for for children, teenagers, I think that they are growing up with an assumption that AI is part of the world. It's they've grown up around it, and it's not really something they can kind of ignore. I don't think any of us can really get away from it. But um, I think the some of the key things I get asked about, and I talk about with other people too, are how and when do you expose children to AI? And I think on that, I think most of them are already exposed to it all the time anyway, whether we like it or not. And so then I think it's about how do you help them have an awareness of what AI is, broadly how it works, and how they should think about it, and how should they respond to that. So I'll give you an example. Recently, so my son's really into soccer, and there was a recent example 2 or 3 weeks ago where there was a an AI generated image of a famous soccer player that went around and went viral online, and it was an image of him with a caption. It was an image of him hugging his daughter, crying, and it was a fake story that got circulated saying that his daughter had cancer. It was completely false. There was no truth to the story whatsoever, but this went around online. And my son told me about this story, and then we were both surprised to see that this player was actually playing in a match, not taking time off, as this post had indicated. And so it's about how do you help to give them the skills and the tools to just take a step back and pause and say, well, wait, is that true? Do I trust that? Like what's the real agenda here? In this instance, actually, the haircut on this footballer was actually the soccer player was actually really bad. It wasn't even how his hair looks anymore. It's like how he used to look 2 years ago. But the picture still went viral. So it wasn't even a good impression of him, and it still went viral. And so it just shows the importance of just taking a step back and saying, is that real? Do I trust that? Should I trust that information? I think is really important.
That's amazing. Now, you've got like two more books coming even and this it feels like we just kind of scraped the surface. So how can people find your books and kind of learn about this stuff on their own? Like I say, this is the future. So the more we can learn, the better we can utilize this new tool.
So the book Critical Intelligence is available on Amazon, and I'm just about to release a new book called When AI Shops, which is all about how AI is changing the way that we buy and sell and shop. And that's also going to be available on Amazon in the next few weeks.
Amazing. How can folks follow you and your kind of your career and your writing?
Mostly I'm active on LinkedIn. I have a weekly newsletter called Human Machines, which I publish, usually once or twice a week, on a rate related to topics around critical thinking around the future of AI and robotics and what that means for the world of work, as well as a wide range of topics.
Fantastic. Geoff Gibbons, thank you so much for making a little bit of time. I wish you all the best with this book. It's going to make a huge impact with folks because I think you're onto something because we all need to think more critically and interact with AI much more mindfully. So I thank you so much for making some time for me.
Awesome. Thank
All
you,
right.
Chris.
Thank you. Take care. That was an amazing, fascinating conversation with author Geoff Gibbons, talking about his newest book, Critical Intelligence Strengthening Human Thinking in the Age of AI. The book is available now on Amazon. You can follow him on LinkedIn. It's Geoff, Geoff, Gibbons, Gibbins, and LinkedIn. And I'm sure he has a link to his newsletter. He puts a newsletter out that will kind of give you kind of thoughts and updates on the world of AI. He also has two more books coming out. When AI Shops, and that is going to be out in December. And that kind of gets into the idea of how AI is becoming kind of a tool for shopping, and then the third book will be out in early 2026. The Human AI Enterprise: Building Liquid Organizations Where Humans and AI Thrive. Again, this was a great conversation. It couldn't be more topical, and absolutely fascinating, and definitely something to keep an eye on as the world kind of keeps evolving around us. So I thank him for his time, and thank you for listening along. You can find all of my stuff at spookychris.com. I'm an author, I'm a podcaster, reviewer, blah, blah, blah. Everything is at spookychris.com. All of my own books are at amazon.com as well. I thank you, friend, for joining me, and I will speak to you soon. Take care.